All right, we're here for match number 5 between John Johnson and Caleb Durward. It should be a classic matchup of Not Miracles versus Blue Black Omnito.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting one. Show and tell matchups in the past used to be, kind of good for against Miracle decks in general because the counterbalance lock in general doesn't have a lot of threes. But we're not really focused on that anymore because top and counterbalance is gone. So definitely going to be a little bit tougher for Caleb, I think, this time. Around playing against a combo deck. If he doesn't have the way to just kind of lock them out. But I do like JJ's build a lot. It's just very clean build. Just has a lot of cards that he wants and needs, and I think John's going to be pretty favored in this matchup. What do you think, Jarvis?
I agree with that. Although one thing to note about Caleb's deck is that he does have the full 4 counterspell. It's a lot of counterspells, and the reason you see so many nowadays is because, well, they don't have counterbalance. So you got to play some other 2-mana spells that say counter on it, right?
Right. You trade out 4 counter for another counter, and then everything's fine. I think that's the way it works.
So this is not Miracles containing 3 Miracles.
Right, because sometimes you just got to get them really good.
Yeah, you just feel that the card's there, and then it's there.
Right. Sometimes I think it might be for the tilt factor. You hope you get paired against Julian real bad. He plays out a bunch of his elves, and you're just like, Terminus you. And people who are in the chat don't get to see it, but Julian is of course raging at home.
Of course, just full of rage.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited here to see this matchup. I do like John's hand a lot. Do we know who's on the play?
It says Caleb D, right?
Caleb D is on the play, and I do like Caleb's hand a lot. His hand is just forcible, counterspell, Snapcaster Mage, Jace. Pretty much everything that he's really gonna want. In the first like 4 or 5 turns, to try and fight through what John's going to present. But John, on the other hand, just has a bunch of ponders in hand, and that's going to be pretty good for helping him set up, for his future turns, find himself a lot of protection. John's definitely going to be looking for a lot of Thoughtseizes here.
Actually, if John finds enough show and tells, Caleb is just going to run out of cards. If you just find 3 show and tells, you can just run your opponent out.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Jarvis. If John does find enough show and tells, sometimes you can just jam them down your opponent's throat and force them just have a ton of answers here. And it kind of looks like this might be his plan. Although Limdol's Vault is also a really nice card here for John, and can help him set up the next 5 cards as well.
I think we'll actually see John just EOT Limdol's Vault, and then next turn jam Petal plus Thoughtseize, because he can almost certainly Limdol's Vault for a stack of 5 that's good.
Yeah, my guess here is that if John is going to stack his 5 the exact way he wants, I assume it's going to be something like Thoughtseize Show and Tell or Thoughtseize Brainstorm Show and Tell would be his ideal top 3 cards.
Don't believe he wants any of those cards.
Well, I mean, if you're assuming that your show and tell doesn't resolve, which you have to say, like, if Caleb is just kind of like playing and passing and not really doing a lot here, you can safely assume that he probably has at least one of his counter spells. Trying to find a backup is never a bad thing here, but we do see the shuffle of the first Ponder. 3 lands is not great. City of Traders, Polluted Delta, Omniscience off the top, and while City of Traders Omniscience is fine, this Delta is not really great. I wouldn't be surprised to see JJ ship this, though, at all.
Well, like I mentioned, I think he just wants to find show and tells.
Yeah. There is obviously the concern here of if he does show and tell into an Emrakul, and Caleb is able to flip a Terminus, that can provide present some problems.
The other way that can go bad is actually if Caleb puts land into play and then just has another one, plays Jace and bounces it.
Yep, that's another a good answer here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see John look for or keep this omniscience for no other reason than to have a way to fight through Terminus or Jace.
Yeah, exactly. But I think my gut tells me I don't know. I guess it's actually fine, but it's like, would you rather draw omniscience or a random card? And I guess JJ determined he would rather draw a random card. But what we'll probably see is just EOT Lumdul's Vault.
Yeah, we've seen John, be patient in places where in spots he can afford to be, and jammed when he can afford to jam as well. And I do agree with John that his best case here is just kind of pass and just relax and set up everything here. And I think with double forcible, double blue card, we're very likely to see Caleb just kind of jam a Jace the Mind Sculptor and get his wheels turning. It looks like that is what Caleb is doing.
Interestingly, if I were John, I would actually cast Lumdul's Vault with the Jace activation on the stack.
Okay, and why don't you explain to the chat why that's something that you're interested in doing?
There's a very outside chance that Caleb actually wants to force the Lumdul's Vault. And indeed, that actually looks like what John's going for here. I mean, the upside to letting the Jace activation resolve is very, very, very low, I think. You're hiding the fact that you have a Lumdul's Vault. You're going to cast it and stuff anyways, so I think it's marginally better to cast it with the Brainstorm on the stack.
It definitely makes a lot of sense, and we do see here that the Slimdle's Vault is Emrakul, Preordain, Brainstorm, and Cunning Wish, and I don't think John's in the market for this 5, so we're pretty likely to see him kind of move this to the bottom and try again. Second set of 5, Lotus Petal, Omniscience, Brainstorm, Cunning Wish, Misty Rainforest, not great. And I think this...
Yeah. I think you keep here as well. I think you just want the Thoughtseize and then Force of Will.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be pretty good. Although it is kind of an interesting spot here, right? Because if you take Thoughtseize and you see all these Force of Wills, your Force of Will is not going to be great next turn, since Caleb is going to have access to a second Force of Will and a counterspell, and most likely another blue card here.
To be fair, JJ has a fetch land, so if it goes bad, we can just reset.
Yeah, that is definitely a good point. How would you stack this, Jarvis?
Well, so Omniscience and Emrakul are dead cards. I would put them on the bottom. I would probably put the Force under the Thoughtseize. And the Ponder below those 3.
So you're looking at drawing Thoughtseize, then Force, then Ponder in that order?
Oh, interesting. JJ puts the Force first. I guess JJ's plan is to pitch Lumdul's Vault to Force of Will.
Yeah, it does look like that is the case, and he gets to reload with a Thoughtseize and then a Ponder in the following turns, although certainly not great here. And we see that Caleb's Jace 0 is going to get a Spell Pierce, a Council's Judgment, and a Plane. So we're going to see that Planes and those Council's Judgment go back, and I think Caleb is pretty happy with the 6 that he currently is sitting on.
Yeah, I would. If I had to put odds on this game of Caleb winning, I would say it's like probably 80%.
That is a pretty good odds, and I think Caleb would be pretty happy to hear that that's what he's sitting on. So the thing here is John's just really looking at this point to just try and find as much as possible to try and jam and try and fight through all this. Soft counters like Spell Piercer can be relatively easy to play around, but hard counters like Force of Will and Counterspell are going to be a little tougher for John to fight through it. And even though he's fought through the first couple of Force of Wills, Caleb is going to be pretty easy to reload here. Wouldn't be surprised to see him pitch Spell Pierce here. Spell Pierce being the weakest of the cards in his hand.
I agree with that. So what's going to happen, I think for John is he's going to play his fetch because he knows the cards on top are not good enough to win the game anymore.
Yeah. He knows he's going to need, at least one more show and tell, if not two, and possibly another counterspell to try and fight through what Kale was representing. And, even though this is kind of very medium spot, getting rid of 4 cards, it is necessary for Caleb, and he's going to be pretty easy to reload here with this Jace. But interestingly enough, it looks like he's going to Fate Seal the Plains that was on top of his deck away.
Yeah, he knows it's not good enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, right? Because if you brainstorm here, you're looking to reload, but it looks like Caleb is just right on a path to try and win the game instead of just trying to protect himself.
I think he understands that the danger is if Caleb finds too many show and tells. Like, the thing is, Caleb's already used 2 Forcibles and pitched a Spell Pierce. How many more counters can, realistically expect to draw? You have 2 forces and 3 counterspell left in your deck. It's not actually, great odds that you'll draw all of them.
Yeah, and I do like here that John kept the Ponder on top of his library, and he went ahead and he fetched. He knew all 3 cards on top of his library, didn't want any of them. So we're going to see a shuffle here from land preordain into a Cunning Wish. Now Cunning Wish is kind of interesting here. We do. I'm gonna bring up John's board because I'm actually.
You can get Noxious Revival to put show and tell on top of this deck.
That is a good one. I am interested. I'm gonna bring up the deck list because I want to make sure that I know all the cards. You can get here, but Noxious Revival is definitely the best one, and I do 100% agree with that.
Yeah, too bad he can't get Dig Through Time.
Yeah, that card was very fair. Very fair. I missed that card. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like his sideboard. He can get a Flusterstorm, and he can get a Noxious Revival, and I think those are going to be the two that he's most interested in getting. And I would not be surprised. I would be surprised to see anything else but that.
I did not see an intuition in Caleb's sideboard. I don't think he has one. Yeah, there's no intuition. Interestingly enough, if he had a Soul Land, he could play Fireman's Foresight off the Lotus Petal next turn.
It'd be pretty interesting here, but yeah, it looks like we're just gonna see. My guess is this Noxious Revival in the upkeep. It looks like he's playing around a potential Spell Pierce out of Caleb here. I like Caleb's patience on that. He waited to see what John's gonna get. This is kind of one of the interesting parts about knowing deck lists. It really helps you make a lot of these closer decisions. It makes them a little bit easier to make.
Except we just failed to play around Spell Pierce here. So
yeah, that is certainly true.
He played around Spell Pierce once, but then failed to play around it. So, I mean, now John knows that Caleb doesn't have a Spell Pierce in his hand, because you would just snap Spell Pierce there.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yep. I think Jace is probably going to wrap this one up fairly quickly.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Caleb is just going to make a move. He's going to start plussing his Jace on top of John's library. Really going to prevent him.
He created himself again.
Oh, he did? That's quite interesting. It looks like he sees a Brainstorm on top.
The reason he's doing that is he knows what he needs, but he doesn't actually know what John needs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. If Caleb had a Vendilion Click, there's a good chance we'd see him go after John's deck.
Exactly, because then information. Yeah, but if I were Caleb, I would know that my opponent is just looking for show and tells.
Yeah, I think the Noxious Revival on the show and tell in the upkeep kind of gave that away.
Yep. Oh, now interesting. Now we Fate Seal. Did he bottom preordain? Top.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those interesting sub games, right? where you could leave on top if they have a fetch land, and a player could go, okay, well, because he left on top, I have to get rid of it. It's obviously a bad card.
Entreat? Oh, I think that just kills our opponent. It was the first card drawn this turn, so he obviously can miracle it. Yeah, this is good old-fashioned clean magic, and don't accident.
Well, obviously miracles are great. Obviously, that's why you won. But we're gonna go ahead and head to sideboards here, and what do you expect John to board in? My guess is kind of he's gonna board out some number of Lotus Petals, board in Flusterstorm, and maybe Surgical Extraction. It looks like he is going for Surgical Extraction.
So the plan is just Surgical, or a Blast?
Yeah, it looks like he's just gonna try and utilize that to leverage, leverage what his counter spells are. And we do see here that Caleb does have his own blasts in the sideboard, and he's gonna get rid of his Terminus. His Source of Plowshares are not gonna be very good here. There's usually a this little tension that you have when you board against decks like these, because every once in a while they'll have creatures in their sideboard. Storm generally plays cards like Xanded Swarm a lot. If you remember during the Dig Through Time era, the Show and Tell deck played Young Pyromancer in the sideboard for a pretty long time here. So if you're not familiar with your opponent's sideboard, it might be right to try and keep in something to interact with that. But knowing deck list that lets Caleb have a clean bill of health here and just get rid of Brawl.
The Bloodmoon's coming back in. Although we've seen the Bloodmoon be just not very good for Caleb in a lot of the games he's drawn it.
No, and this is definitely interesting, right? Because if John just goes ahead and fetches, for both of his Underground Seas and plays an Ancient Tomb and gets his Show and Tell countered, then Caleb slams a Bloodmoon. John could just be locked out of casting spells for quite some time.
So there's also an interesting tension if you're supposed to side in Containment Priest or not.
Just as a flash threat?
No, it's still stop Show and Tell for Emrakul.
Oh, sure, that's definitely true. John's major plan number one is to put on missions cast Emrakul, but
Show and Tell caster to pitch to force.
Oh, that's clever. He wants to keep his blue count high.
Blue count's plenty high. I don't think
Caleb just wants to be in a spot where he never has to be worried about force of will. I kind of understand what he's doing, although obviously we don't agree with it. Caleb has a plan in mind, and he kind of wants to stick to it.
His plan is to have enough blue cards to pitch to force. I don't agree with it, but it's a plan.
Yeah. We see here a mulligan. This mulligan is pretty brutal for John. Although
Caleb doesn't actually have that much resistance, though. So
yeah, it looks like we're going to see this Polluted Delta and this Thoughtseize kept on top, and we're definitely going to see this Thoughtseize probably be fired off in the next couple of turns. Although, to be honest, John's been being pretty patient with how he's played this game, so I wouldn't be surprised if he held the Thoughtseize for the turn he went off, especially because he has Cydia Traders in hand.
Yep. Counterspell, a great draw, though. For
sure.
It does mean you can burn your Ponder here as well.
And it looks like he is going to Ponder, and I didn't quite see what he did.
So a reason I sort of like siding in Containment Priest is that it's a flash threat.
Yeah, I definitely can understand. I definitely can understand that. Like, a flash threat's never bad. Caleb doesn't have counterbalance in his deck. He does have counterspell, and cards like Containment Priest that you can just kind of chuck out can be pretty good here. And it looks like Caleb found an Emrakul off that Ponder here, so he is going to be able to fetch and cast a Preordain here. And at this point, my guess here is John's best bet here is to hope that this Preordain is a Force of Will blue card, so he just has multiple ways to protect himself.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Caleb's drawing like hot fire though. Although I guess he knew the spell pierce from the ponder if he didn't shuffle. So
It's definitely in a good spot. Caleb definitely has all the tools he needs to interact with John in this matchup here, and it looks like he's drawing all of them pretty early. So he's gonna have a ton of time here. This ponder is gonna see Island Plains, Snapcaster Mage. I don't think Caleb's excited about keeping any of these cards.
I would keep the Snapcaster.
You keep the Snapcaster and then just draw another land and then shuffle away the last one.
Yeah. You sort of I think Snapcaster is just better than a random draw from his deck at this point. That's the metric I go by.
Sure.
I think it's okay to draw one dead card, but not two dead cards.
Okay, that makes sense. And the fetch lands here allow Caleb to kind of reset the last bad card.
Exactly. If you're John, do you play land first, then play Thoughtseize? To play around Spell Pierce?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. I think. Yeah, this is really hard. This turn's pretty hard. I mean, our lines are, we could cast Thoughtseize, see if Caleb does anything. We could play Misty Rainforest and pass and cast Brainstorm. I don't know. I think being too greedy here could definitely cause some problems. And it looks like John's just going to be incredibly patient here. I guess his assumption is that Caleb just has a ton of counter spells in his hand, and there's just no reason for him to make any sudden moves.
So the slight problem with that is, I think John has more dead draws in his deck than Caleb does by this point, especially in a post-board configuration. If you look at their decks, then Caleb actually has more good cards than John has good cards.
Yeah, and this is actually pretty interesting here. He put back City of Traders and a fetch land and just played a land. And it looks like next turn, he did keep the City of Traders on top, I believe. So I believe John's plan next turn is to cast Thoughtseize and then cast Show and Tell and then cast Flusterstorm.
What Show and Tell?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he had Show and Tell. That's my bad.
He definitely has to fetch here because there's nothing good.
You're absolutely right. I thought he had Show and Tell in his hand. That's my fault.
Instead, John keeps drawing cards that are real bad, and Caleb draws cards that are relatively good.
I believe that's why Caleb is the greatest. I think that's why.
Well, like I mentioned before, I think there are more good cards in Caleb's deck than there are in John's deck.
Yeah, I can definitely see that here. Maybe John's secret plan is to just hardcast Emrakul at some point. I don't know if he has the mana base for that, but
it's easy enough to check that. That's actually an interesting point.
Let's see. He has 2 ancient tomb, 1 city, so that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Nope, he only has 12. And I think
he has metal in his deck.
Yep, so he can only go up to 14.
Yep. We found a bunch of Show and Tells.
Oh, all right. Now we're cooking with fire here.
Oh, interesting. Now it might actually be enough to get through all of Caleb's stuff.
Yeah. Are you on the plan of starting keeping this ancient tomb and just jamming to Show and Tell, or do you think you're on the wait another turn and then lead off with Thoughtseize into Show and Tell?
It's hard for me to say that because I can already see Caleb's hand. It's hard for me to disassociate the information I have from Caleb's hand from making this play. Like, I can't give you an honest answer.
Okay, that's pretty reasonable here. Let's try and figure out what John's doing here. And it looks like he's moving an Omniscience and an Ancient Tomb to the sideboard. I think we can all agree that the Omniscience, the second Omniscience, is something that we can put away with this Brainstorm. I think the real question is does John want to keep an Ancient Tomb and try and push this turn, or if he'd like to wait till next turn? And we're gonna see next turn Or we're going to see either this turn or next turn what he's doing. It looks like Show and Tell might be one of the clicks here from John to put back on top of his deck.
So if you want to cast Show and Tell this turn, you probably lead with Thoughtseize. See what your opponent does.
Right. Because if Caleb is going to go ahead and Spell Pierce the Thoughtseize, then you might be in an okay spot to just go ahead and jam.
I think John's plan is actually to jam. Look at his mana constraints is the reason. Yep. If he doesn't jam this turn, next turn he'll only have 6 mana, which implies he can only cast 2 Show and Tells. So I think for mana reasons, you're supposed to jam here.
I can definitely see that here, and it looks like John does agree with you, and it looks like that's what he's going to go for. He's going to fire off this Thoughtseize here, and we're going to see how Caleb's going to react, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Caleb go ahead and lead off with a Spell Pierce here. This can be a free Spell Pierce, plus he still has Counterspell and Force of Will at the ready.
So we're going to see Show and Tell, and then we're going to see Snapcaster Spell Pierce.
I think John's going to be okay with this trade here, although obviously not the best. You have to start making moves at some point in time, and looks like John's going to start. Looks like he's not going to start this turn. It looks like he's going to wait till next turn. There's a chance that John ordered the top of his library as Omniscience Show and Tell, so next turn he can cast Show and Tell, Force of Will, pitch the second Omniscience, and still have Flusterstorm at the ready. And then if all of that goes awry, he still has another Show and Tell the next turn.
This intrigue is not looking so hot.
Well, it's fine. Caleb will draw Brainstorm eventually, and then he'll put it on top of his deck, and then it'll be a miracle.
Some miracle. The Brainstorm miracle.
So we'll see here. The Show and Tell's going to go ahead and get jammed. Oh, interestingly enough, it looks like John actually kept the Show and Tell on top of his library here instead of the Omniscience.
Storm 2. So Flusterstorm costs forces Caleb to pay 3.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going to go ahead and Force of Will this Counterspell, I think.
The question is what you pitch.
I think it's the Omniscience because he has another Omniscience on top of his library.
Well, no, if you get your thing through.
Right, if you get your thing through, you're banking on Caleb not having Jace. I mean, I think we can safely assume that Caleb is not going to have Terminus in his library post-board. Interestingly enough, he pitched Flusterstorm here. And it looks like his plan is to try and... He thinks that Caleb might only have one piece left. And if he's right, then this works. But it looks like this Snapcaster Mage is going to go ahead and target this Counterspell and go ahead and get this out of here. And this next Show and Tell is also not going to resolve, unfortunately for John here.
Then John's going to be left with Emrakul Omniscience versus probably just a hard casting treat next turn.
Well, yeah, it's Emrakul Omniscience, and he knows he has another Omniscience on top of his library. I really think that I would have kept... I think I would have kept that Flusterstorm. I think not keeping that Flusterstorm might end up costing John here.
Again, that's because we can see their hands. Like, John's plan was to play around Terminus. It's not a terrible plan.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
It's not just Terminus, actually. It's also Jace.
Yeah, I still think, like, if your plan is to try and, like, fight through everything, I think pitching the Omniscience here is your best option, because then you can Flusterstorm, and he has to have another one. He has to have another answer, and then you get to untap and cast another Show and Tell if all of that resolves, and Caleb's on pretty low. So I'm not sure.
I don't think Show and Tell is an out anymore. Because Caleb actually has 6 lands to just sacrifice and an Angel to block with. So it would have to be a very good brainstorm here that can't get through counterspell. You might see John kill himself with Ancient Tomb. Well, that was a fairly one-sided affair, unfortunately, for John. But it does prove one of the weaknesses of Omnitel sometimes, which is if you float out on the wrong cards, it's very easy for your opponent, full of disruption, to just slowly outdraw you, and it snowballs from there. But yeah, it was kind of an awkward one.
I think our last match is Tim versus John, right?
It is, and I am going to have to log off in a sec for that.
And it looks like that's it for me. Thank you guys for letting me do some commentary. I can't wait to be back till next week. And then I get to play in two weeks. 2 weeks, because I think I'm playing May 11th. Yeah. I'm actually kind of excited about my pod. I think the scariest matchup for me in my pod is Elves. Elves generally has a good Sultai matchup. And I decided to play Dread Knight over Toxic Deluge, so we'll see how that works out.
I think we're probably muted now, if I had to guess.
Bye.